Fast food did not enter your life as a problem. It entered as a solution. At a time when life was accelerating, cities were expanding, time was becoming scarce. Cooking was no longer a daily priority. Convenience became essential. And in that shift, food began to change its role. It stopped being a process and started becoming a product. Something fast, accessible, always available. But this did not begin with burgers. It began much earlier. In the early 20th century, food production started to scale. Bread became one of the first major examples, mass-produced, standardized, distributed across entire populations. Brands like Wonder Bread helped define this shift. Food was no longer prepared individually, it was manufactured. Before that, another transformation had already taken place. Canned food. Originally created to feed soldiers during war, it introduced a new idea: food that could last. Not made to nourish immediately, but made to endure time. And then, in 1941, a system emerged that would redefine everything. White Castle, one of the first chains to standardize fast meals at scale. Simple, fast, repeatable. But the real turning point came later. In 1948, Richard and Morris McDonald introduced a new model, not a new type of food, a new system: speed, efficiency, production lines applied to meals, menus reduced, processes time, every movement optimized. And later, Ray Kroc expanded that model into something global. From that moment on, food was no longer just something you ate. It became something designed, engineered to be fast, consistent, scalable, and it worked because it solved a real problem: lack of time. But in solving that problem, something else began to form silently. Because when food becomes automatic, the body stops being consulted. And when that happens, the signals begin to change, not immediately, but gradually, until what once was a solution becomes a pattern, and that pattern becomes invisible. And the real question is no longer when it started, but when it stopped being questioned. Fast food did not just change how food is served, it changed how food is created. When speed becomes the priority, the process must be reduced. And when the process is reduced, something is removed: time, complexity, and often quality. At that point, the industry begins to reformulate food, no longer based only on whole ingredients, but on components: isolated proteins, refined sugars, processed oils, additives designed to adjust flavor, texture, and shelf life. Food stops being prepared and starts being constructed, designed to taste the same, look the same, trigger the same response, no matter where you are. This model expands quickly, chains replicate it, production increases, costs drop, and consumption rises. But there is something rarely considered: the body does not respond only to calories, it responds to information. And when that information changes, the response changes. At first, nothing seems wrong. You keep eating, you keep functioning, you keep moving forward. But slowly, the signals begin to shift. Energy becomes unstable, hunger becomes frequent, focus becomes harder to sustain, not as isolated events, but as patterns, because your internal system is trying to adapt to something it does not fully recognize. And adaptation comes at a cost. But that cost is not immediate. It accumulates day after day, meal after meal, until your body begins to operate differently. Not because it is failing, but because it is adapting. And that adaptation is where something deeper begins. What changed was not only the food, it was the frequency. There was a time when eating had boundaries: a beginning, a middle, an end. There were pauses, moments where the body could process, moments where the system could reset. But as fast food expanded and processed foods became more accessible, those boundaries began to disappear. Food became constant, available at any moment, within reach at all times. And more than that, it was designed to stimulate. The combination of sugar, fat, and salt is not random. It is calculated, engineered to activate the reward system in your brain. And that creates a subtle shift. You no longer eat only when you need to. You respond to cravings, to impulses, to signals that feel urgent but are not. And every time that happens, your body has to react, regulate blood sugar, release hormones, adjust energy. But without real pauses, the system never fully resets. It never returns to baseline. And over time, this begins to change how you experience hunger, how you recognize fullness, how your energy moves throughout the day. But something deeper is happening beneath all of this, because inside your body, there is a system that depends on rhythm, an internal environment that responds to what you consume. And when consumption becomes constant, that environment begins to shift, not visibly, but functionally. And that shift starts to influence everything, not just your digestion, but your energy, your focus, your stability. And it happens without a clear breaking point, just a gradual transition until the new pattern becomes normal. And once normal changes, reference disappears. There is a system inside your body that responds to all of this, not as a single organ, but as an ecosystem. Inside your digestive system, there are trillions of microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, microscopic life. Together, they form what science calls the gut microbiome. This system is not passive. It participates in digestion, in nutrient processing, in the production of compounds your body depends on. And more importantly, it communicates with your brain through what is known as the gut-brain axis, a direct connection where signals travel constantly between your gut and your mind. And when this system is balanced, your body reflects it. Energy feels more stable. Focus becomes clearer. The system operates with less resistance. But when that balance begins to shift, the signals change, not suddenly, but subtly. Discomfort after meals, inconsistent energy, difficulty concentrating, sensations that seem unrelated, but are not, because they originate from the same system. And when your diet becomes dominated by fast, processed, and constant inputs, this ecosystem adapts. Certain bacteria begin to grow, others begin to decline, and that shift alters how your body responds, not just to food, but to stress, to energy demands, to daily function. And all of this happens quietly because this system does not demand attention. It adjusts until the effects become noticeable. And by then, they are no longer temporary, they are part of your pattern. The problem is not only what you eat, it is the environment you live in. The human body was built around rhythm, light and darkness, activity and rest, eating and pause. But that rhythm has been replaced. Stimulation is constant. Food is always available. Rest is fragmented, and the system tries to keep up. But there is a limit, because adaptation without recovery is not balance, it is strain. And that strain does not appear all at once. It begins quietly, small fluctuations in energy, shifts in mood, moments of mental fatigue. Nothing extreme, but consistent. And over time, it deepens. The body continues to function, but with less efficiency. The mind continues to operate, but with less clarity. And the most important part, it begins to feel normal because it happens every day. And when something repeats long enough, it is no longer questioned. It is accepted. But there is something most people miss. The body is not failing, it is responding to the type of food it receives, to the frequency of consumption, to the environment surrounding it. And when those conditions remain unchanged, the system reorganizes itself, not to perform better, but to survive. And survival is not the same as balance. At some point, the question changes. It stops being about what is wrong and becomes about what can be done. Most people believe the solution is to do more effort, more discipline, more control. But that approach fails because the problem did not begin with a lack of effort. It began with a lack of support. The body does not need to be forced. It needs the conditions to return to balance. And one of the most effective systems in this environment is the one connected to digestion, because that is where many of the signals begin. And when this system is under pressure, everything starts to fluctuate. Energy, focus, clarity. For a long time, the response was to ignore it, to push through, to compensate. But a different approach has started to emerge, not based on forcing the body, but on supporting it, especially when it comes to the microbiome, that internal ecosystem that responds directly to what you consume every day. And when it receives proper support, the signals begin to shift gradually, more stability, less fluctuation, more consistency over time. Today, some formulations are designed with that purpose, to support this system from within. One example is Prime Biome, a daily formula created to support gut microbiome balance and internal stability, not as a standalone solution, but as support for a system your body already depends on. And when that support is introduced, the system begins to respond, not instantly, but consistently, and that changes direction. For some people, this understanding goes further. They begin to realize that the problem is not only internal, but systemic, not just what they are consuming, but where it comes from. Because when food stops being produced and starts being manufactured at scale, control begins to shift. It no longer belongs to the individual, it belongs to the system. And that creates a silent dependency. You are not just choosing what to eat. You are choosing from what is available. And what is available was not designed for long-term health. It was designed to scale, to last, to sell. And when that becomes the default, regaining control requires something different, not extremism, awareness. For some, that means adjusting choices. For others, it goes further. They begin to question the origin of their food, how it is produced, what they are actually putting into their bodies, not as a rejection of the system, but as a way to not depend entirely on it. Because the moment you see it, something changes. You stop reacting and you start choosing. And that choice becomes the beginning of something deeper. At some point, everything begins to connect, not because something new was discovered, but because something was finally understood. The body was never working against you. It was responding to what it receives, to how often it receives it, to the environment it is placed in. For years, the focus has been on correcting symptoms, fatigue, lack of focus, inconsistent energy, treated as isolated problems. But they are not isolated. They are patterns. Patterns created by repetition, by the way you eat, by the rhythm you live in, by the constant stimulation that never allows the system to reset. And when that pattern changes, the response changes, not immediately, but consistently. Because the body does not need to be redesigned. It needs to be supported, given space to function without constant pressure. And that begins with small decisions: what you consume, how often you consume it, and the kind of support you provide to your system, not as a temporary fix, but as a direction. Because in the end, it is not intensity that restores balance. It is consistency. And when that consistency aligns with what your body actually needs, balance stops being something distant and becomes natural again. And in that moment, something becomes clear. What felt permanent never was. It was simply the result of a pattern repeated long enough. And once the pattern shifts, the result shifts with it. If this made you see things differently, or if you recognize something in your own routine, share this with someone who might need to see it too.